Hello, welcome to another episode of the Richmond BigFooty Tigercast, coming off a very, very big win against the Gold Coast Suns. I think all of us were kind of hoping and expecting that, but good that the boys got the 4 points nonetheless, and have officially secured a top 2 spot for this season, which is an amazing effort. Tonight we've got a pretty big show, so we'll get stuck into it straight away. Our first guest, he's a returning guest, and he also hosted this while I was away for a bit. Rodney Dangerfield, welcome back, mate.
Hey, Michael, it's always a pleasure, mate.
Good to have you back on board. What's been happening in your part of the world?
Not a lot, just watching the mighty Tigers get up again and again. Still feels very strong. I'm starting to get used to it, and really looking forward to the finals.
Even just sort of reading bits and pieces, whether it's on social media or on BigFooty itself, I won't call it arrogance, I'll call it confidence, that now a lot of us are now just expecting to win most 99% of the games that we go into, which is a strange feeling where previous years it was, okay, how are we going to find a way to lose this?
Exactly. Yeah, it is a very different feeling.
No, which is good. Good for a change. And our second guest tonight is our first timer on the show. Juke, welcome to the show, mate.
Thanks, Michaels. Great to be here. Ready to pop my podcast cherry.
Very good. And as we do with all our first-time guests, we'll get to know a bit more about you. So how did you become a Richmond supporter?
My dad has been a long-time Richmond supporter ever since he got into Australia in the early 70s, and of course Richmond were doing pretty well then, and he thought to fit in he'd support yellow and black, and yeah, had to take me with him.
And what about the grand final last year? Was there a favourite moment watching that game?
Oh, I think a lot of it was amazing, but I just, one that sticks out to me very clearly is Jack Revolt running down, I think it was Rory Atkins or somebody on the wing after he'd taken the advantage. And I think that was the moment for me, and that was when I knew that we were on here and that we were playing our game, and we knew how to win the game, and we did. So I think that's one that sticks out, but definitely there's a lot in there.
Absolutely, and hopefully we can replicate it again this year. Before we jump into the review of the Gold Coast game, just a bit of MRP news, or MRO news. Tex Walker's been given 2 weeks from the MRO for his sling tackle on Kelly from GWS. I've been told that initially it was actually a 1-week suspension, but the Crows asked for 2 behind closed doors, so they don't have to drop him.
I was actually at that game and saw that, so I was a bit surprised it got 2, but I guess it's outcome focused and not intention focused. So
yeah, it definitely is, but he's been rubbish anyway this year. I had a crack at, I think, what Waitley's comments were on 360 a while ago about him, just pretty much rubbishing the fact that he's not that great of a captain. Well, he's not this year anyway, so... But anyway, enough about Tex. He can sit out the rest of the year and enjoy his time off and watch us play finals again, given that they choked big time. The Gold Coast...
He's still standing in that pose. I think he hasn't moved.
He hasn't moved. He's still MIA. They've lost the plot down there at Adelaide.
Oh. I feel bad for them. I actually feel bad for them and Tex, because I think we've rubbed it in so much, and we've gone from strength to strength, and they've just been injury hit, and players want to leave, and yeah. Anyway.
You can't feel for them. You see the photo of the seat for the Premiership Cup.
Oh, the arrogance. No, they deserve everything they cop. All right, on to our game against the Gold Coast Suns. It kind of went as expected, although I'm sure all of us held a little bit of nerves given that we haven't won interstate yet, and we've got some bad history against the Gold Coast. I think it's easy to say. Rodney, what did you make of the game?
Oh, it's a funny game to watch. I mean, I don't mean to sound arrogant, like you were saying before, but I was sort of half watching it and half flicking over the Hawthorns along, because it was just always going to be one of those games where, and to be honest, we took the piss when we were just looking for Jack. You could see in the first 15 minutes, I thought, I can see what's going to happen here. And I did have one of those in-game multis with Jack to kick 5, so I was pretty comfortable after about 15 minutes. But they just... Honestly, they took the piss. So there's not a lot. You can't take a lot out of a game like that. And you can see Dimmer after the game was a little bit, pissed off, I think, with the fact that it was all organised by the players to get Jackie's 10 goals, but that's not the way we want to play footy. And I'm pretty sure they'll get back on the horse this week and And it was just a fun game for them, I think, basically.
It was weird, like in the first quarter, even the first 2.5 to 3 quarters, I didn't really feel like they were trying to hit Jack up every opportunity. I just felt like that he was legitimately the best option because he was breaking away with 5 metres of space every single time he led up to the kicker. So they almost had no choice but to give it to him because he was just demanding it in the right spot. But yeah, come the last quarter, it was definitely Operation Get Jack 10. And funny you say about the Geelong game. So my wife's Hawthorn, as it's well known. We watched the Geelong Hawthorn game live, and I had to record the Richmond game. Try not to go on social media and ruin it for myself. I had to put a box in front of the right-hand corner of the screen so the Fox Footy scores wouldn't give it away, and then watch it. So I was a little bit nervous, thinking, have I just wasted all this time? But no, it was good to see the boys turned on in patches. Duke, what did you make of the game?
I actually get disappointed with these 70, 75-point wins. I always think we could put the pedal to the floor a bit more and notch a century. But yeah, I had similar thoughts to Rodney there. I think it was a bit of a piss take, and I don't know. They gave Jack a bit of a paddock by design, I feel. I think that he was in so much space all the time with no other defenders or our forwards around him that just felt like a bit of a, let's try something different here, not give away too much, not show our hand.
Yeah, even like watching, I mean, the Suns defenders, they were shocking. I mean, Stephen May, he's checked out mentally. He just didn't want a bar of it, wanting anyone else but him to man up on Rewalt. And yeah, it doesn't really show a great deal of leadership. They're
a rabble, the Suns, aren't they? So
yeah. No, well, you can't blame them. I mean, they've lost Tom Lynch to us, so they've cracked the sads.
Honestly, they're it has to be a massive worry for the AFL, the Gold Coast. I just don't see how they're going to, they're losing Lynch. They may lose May, pardon the pun, and I just don't see where they bounce back. And the AFL will go out of their way to our expense and everyone else's expense to get them up, but I just don't see how it's going to happen. I think they're a lost cause.
Yeah, I agree. I think I know they won't do this, but they should almost just relocate them to Tas, start again, and just build them up because, they're not going to have the supporter base anymore. History has shown that no team has really ever succeeded on the Gold Coast, and this is going to be no exception, but the AFL is going to be stubborn about it and try and make sure that it works, but I just can't see any light at the end of the tunnel. Duke, the other player I want to ask you about is Daniel Rioli. He played a bit higher up on the ground on the weekend. We saw him on the wing quite a bit. He had a career-high 25 disposals and was breaking the lines. Do you reckon that's a sign of things to come, or was that just a bit of a one-off?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think him playing higher up the ground is something that we can use, especially now that Lambert's out. But he had 7 inside 50s, which is the highest for the Tigers, and I think he was very good with his decision making, and what he was doing with the ball in hand was all right as well. So yeah, it's a funny one because you'd say he's the captain of that small forward line, but in a sense he could play up the ground as a wing, and especially that Brandon Ellis and Camden McIntosh seem to be in and out of form a lot. Having him there could be very useful come finals time.
And Rodney, what about the even spread of the workload? I know we weren't exactly going at 100 mile an hour, but we still had 11 players that had over 20 disposals. Is there much to take out of that, just with sharing the load around?
I think that's our one wood. We do it every week. And, I actually rang Jared Waitley on the radio today and say that sort of saying the same thing. Everyone's going on about how lucky we are with injuries. Well, every other team is absolutely playing for their survival. They're playing finals every week. Their players are at breaking point. We've just got this beautiful spread. There's no added pressure on any of the big stars, and we're just so primed to have, I don't want to moz us, but to have a better final series than last year. We're just doing it every week. There's such an even spread that that's our strength.
And speaking of the even spread, Josh Caddy come back and hit some form, kicking 4 goals. What did you make of his game, Duke?
Yeah, I thought it was all right. I think he got into the right positions. I think his goal when he got the handoff from Soldo was phenomenal, and I think he's actually a really big weapon for us moving into the finals, just because he can play, and he's so accurate with his kicking as well. It's super impressive and very useful.
And Jack Rewald, of course, stole the show, kicking 10 goals, the only player this year to do so, and passed Ben Brown in the Coleman medal, but I think they're now tied back up again after the Kangaroos played on Sunday. Rodney, was there much more you would have expected from Jack, or was that one of his best games, do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to say, isn't it, when the game panned out the way it did, but I mean, you're not going to get a bigger fan than anyone, I don't think, of Jack Rewalt than myself. I think I posted on one of the forums on our board maybe a few weeks ago. I rate him as a better player than Richo now. I think he's gone past. He's just such an unbelievable footballer, just skills, football acumen, and now he's got this unselfish side to his game. He deserved a day like that. And even they looked a little bit like, a little bit embarrassed that we're not going to play at that all the time. I got me 10. But he's the most important player in our side by far. We lose Jack, I don't even want to think about it. But he's just an absolute sensation.
I think what you said spot on, that he deserved a day like this, and the way he sacrificed his game for us in the past couple of years, I don't think anyone could begrudge the team and himself eyeing off 10 once he got to 5 or 6 really quickly. So he thoroughly deserved that.
He's third in the competition for score involvements, I checked the other day. So, and that's behind Dusty as well. So he just gets involved so much, brings other people into it, his little flicks and tap-ons. People talk about how unselfish he is. I think that, he deserves to be selfish for one game.
Absolutely. And isn't Shane Edwards second?
I think that's for goal assists, not for score involvements.
Okay.
Yeah.
He had a pretty good game as well, Shane Edwards. I think he had another career best, I think I read somewhere, in terms of stats.
Oh, he's had an unbelievable season, hasn't he? I would think, personally, he or Jack would be leading the Jack Dye medal, I would have thought. But that's going to be interesting in itself. But what a player he's become.
And Juke, you mentioned before about Soldo with handballing it off to Caddy, but Soldo's game as a whole, what did you make of it? Coming in for Nankervis, obviously, to take the ruck load. How do you think he went?
Oh, I think he can do a bit parts here and there, but he can't hold a candle to Nank, obviously. And I think he did okay against Witts, who's actually pretty good. I rate Witts, and I think, with experience, he might become an AFL ruckman, but if not, he's pretty decent backup. And I think he can play in tandem with Nankervis as well at points. I think they did that a bit last year, and it worked out all right. So, good test for the young man.
Yeah, I thought he did quite well. The only thing he doesn't really come close to Nank with is his presence around the ground in terms of kicks, marks, handballs, but his ruck work I thought was pretty good. He gave our guys first use, which they're probably not used to for a lot of this season. I think he's just as physical with his body work and crashing packs and trying to tackle blokes as what Nank is as well, which is pretty important to the way we play. So I'd definitely have no issue with him playing a few more games next year just to give him a bit of a chop out. Yeah,
for sure.
And the funny thing I was reading and hearing from the commentators from that game was, I can't remember the Gold Coast player's name who played on Cochin, and they're like, he kept him to 12 disposals, what a great game. And the kid probably did play really well, but Koch only played half the game. What do you make of that kind of management? I think Koch said that he was a bit sore afterwards, Rodney. Is that just you put the cue in the rack, save him for finals, or do you think there's a bit more to it with him being off the ground?
No, I'm loving the way they're managing our players, and especially Trent. If you go back to last year's final series, I can still vividly remember probably the first 5-10 minutes of the first final. The intent, we've been in finals in the past, and we really hadn't measured up. But Trent Cochin's first 10 minutes pretty much told us how we were going to go about that final series, and we never looked back. So we're just holding him back, and you watch him go when it comes to finals. I just know that we've got another level to go to, and he'll lead that charge, and it's just going to be beautiful. He's having a little rest. He might not even play this week. I sort of hope he doesn't. And he's the barometer for us.
So you reckon we've got levels to go? I mean, I think it's fair to say we haven't played our best football for the last month. So you reckon we've got a couple of gears to go up to and are just saving it for finals?
I've got no doubt. I don't know what Duke thinks, but I've got no doubt. I think every other team at the moment are playing finals. They're playing their finals. A lot of teams are bloody throwing up over themselves the way we used to. They're choking. They can't make it. We're just cruising into the finals. We went to another level again last year in the finals, completely somewhere where we'd never been before. And I can't see why we're not going to do it again. And they've been there. They know what it's all about. They're so well poised to hit the finals. I just think we're going to take teams apart in the finals. It sounds ridiculous to say, but that's what I think.
And Duke, what about yourself? How do you view our form heading into finals? Have we still got room to up the ante?
Yeah, I don't want the guys to flirt with form so much, but I guess it's a 23-week season, and you have high intensity training blocks here and there, which I suspect we have at the moment. But look, I think we definitely have another year to go, especially when we get Butler back, and once we get the band back together in some ways. With, I don't know, Townsend might play a good role, a crucial role as well. But yeah, I think there's always improvement that could be there, and I think that's coming from the younger players. Like Higgins is doing pretty well as a fresh-faced kid, and Graham's elevated his pressure game as well. So there's always improvement, and I think the boys are doing that well.
So as it stands right now, there's only 3 players missing from our premiership side, which is Nankervis, who's obviously going to come back in for Soldo, Butler and Townsend. So the 3 players in their spots currently is Soldo, Higgins and Short. Now, I think we can all universally agree that Jaden Short's not going to be dropped anytime soon. And I think Higgins would be hard-pressed to be dropped as well. So is it a risk to bring someone like Butler back in, given he hasn't played for about 8 weeks and is managing that foot injury? And they've just put him in for the same surgery that Kane Lambert's had today to pretty much try and get him right for the first week of finals. Do you find that a bit of a risk, Rodney?
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried for Buck. I think he might struggle to get back in. And ironically, his best mate, Daniel, might be the one who's really under the pump to lose his spot to Dan if it does eventuate that way. And Duke said before with Townsend, and we've got so many options, and I think Town is such a crucial player to us too, but I can't really see him even getting back in at the moment. But I don't think Dan Butler will play in the finals. That's my gut feel.
So I'm looking on our website. They sent an email out with the injury update. So he's been running, but this is Butler. He's been running at about 95%, but still with a bit of a limp and still not full power. So last Friday he had the same minor procedure that Kane Lambert had this morning, which means he's probably going to miss the next 2 games, and we're preparing him for the first final at this stage. They're going to get a much better result with the minor surgery. To me, the 2 surgeries, it's this identical injury that Butler and Lambert have got, but they've both had this minor surgery, which to me seems like a stopgap as opposed to a fixed, just to be able to get him through the next month and a half of football. Duke, do you find there's an element of risk to bring someone like Butler back in, and even Reece Conker for that matter, when he eventually gets himself right for AFL football?
Yeah, absolutely. It's shades of that 2015 elimination final where we rushed in Griffiths and Conker. And, if players are in form and they deserve to keep their spots, I feel like you don't roll the dice on somebody that hasn't played for 8 weeks. Having said that, though, Kane Lambert is he's a talisman for us, and he just puts in so much effort. He's just, consistently leading all-comers and kilometres travelled per game and things like that. And I think his repeat efforts and defensive running is just so important to the way we play. So, yeah, it's a tricky one for the fitness staff and the coaching staff to balance.
I reckon Lambert's situated a lot better to be able to come back and play because he does have that full conditioning. He's played the whole year. So missing 2 weeks might hurt him a little bit, but I think he's going to be able to adjust and make an easier transition back into the AFL than what Butler or Conker might be able to. There's been a lot of talk about that Higgins might, if Butler was to play hypothetically, that Higgins would potentially be one person to make way for him despite his good form in the midfield. Do you reckon they'd be ballsy enough to drop someone like Higgins in a final?
Oh, I don't know. I really have no idea. They might, because he doesn't have the maturity, I suppose. But then again, Conker didn't really play last year during the finals, or much at all, really. So Lambert would be the one that comes in, but so much up in the air, and guys will be really pushing hard for spots, I reckon.
And Rodney, you mentioned this before about you don't mind the idea of resting Cochin this week. With the top two spot locked away now, do we power on full steam ahead and try and stay in form, knowing there's a week off at the end of the home and away season, or do we look to play and manage a bit more?
I think you take advantage of the situation. It's a very rare situation we're in, where the masters are our own destiny, really. And I think if players need a rest, and I think you talk to players, you talk to the conditioning staff, you rest them. I'm not a real big believer in this, you lose continuity, because Trent Cotton's played over 200 games. He knows what he's doing. He might be hanging for a rest, and if he is, you rest him. Some players don't like resting. They like to keep going, but if a player wants to have a week off, just give them the week off. There's probably 8 to 10 players in our side that are locked. There's probably another 8 to 10 that can't afford to give their spot up. But of those 8 to 10, if they don't want to play, give them a week off.
The only thing that concerns me with doing that is that we obviously get the week off after round 23, and then hypothetically, if we win the first final, get another week off, so they effectively might only play one game in maybe a month and a half of football. Does that pose any form of an issue form-wise, do you reckon?
Oh, well, it does for some, but I don't think it does for a Trent Cotchin or a Jack Rewott or an Alex Branch. They're a different beast. But for younger players, yeah, I think it might. Yeah, but it's going to be interesting. And there are a lot of guys that are playing. Like you mentioned before, Jack Higgins. He's playing so fantastically, but he's not short of a spot. And I did get a little bit worried for him when they moved Rioli into the midfield, because I think Rioli's going to be a midfielder eventually. And big picture, that's where he'll play. But when he moved in there, I thought, I'm not sure what that says for Higgins. Or, there are going to be some really good players missing out. But I think there's, like I said, 8 to 10 players that could comfortably put their hand up to have a rest and are professional enough to miss 2 games in 3 and hit the finals flying.
Fair enough. Now, there was a thread started, might have been the other day, I think it was midway through the last quarter of the Gold Coast game, by Harry the Tiger, just letting everyone know that, assuming that we were going to win that Gold Coast game, which we did, that we'd now achieved our best win-loss record since 1982 with 16 wins, which is an amazing effort, given we have finished in the top 4 a couple of times in recent times. But to get through the season with 16 wins and still 2 games to go, is this one of the best seasons you've seen us play, Rodney?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I was only a young kid around those days. I went to the 1980 grand final and the 82 and things like that. But, the memories are very vague, and we were just always good. But 1995, we had an amazing season, but were bettered by an incredible season by Carlton. But this season, when you're defending a premiership, it's been the most dominant season. And to think that it's Richmond, we still can't get our head around. It's been an incredible season. Easily the best season I've seen since, probably I was 10 years old.
And Duke, without wanting to jinx this or anything like that, not saying this is going to happen, but the path to the flag, there's obviously a few teams below us that are going to cause some serious issues for us. Who do you see as the biggest threat in stopping us from going from back to back?
I think it is GWS at this stage. I was at the game on Saturday against Adelaide, and their running is so powerful. Their ball movement is so slick. I mean, it's really, I think, the antithesis to our game style almost. Or not quite, maybe West Coast is, but I think that is the one that might be able to stand up against our game on the MCG. I'm not really worried about West Coast because I think results have spoken for themselves that they don't travel as well there. But Hawthorn as well could be a bit of a smoky, and I think Clarko has a few tricks up his sleeve, and he definitely knows what he's doing deep in September. So I'm worried about all teams, but those are my top picks.
And Rodney, is there any element of truth that, well, not truth, but could we potentially be our own worst enemy?
Well, you hear that. Well, I've just got a message on my phone, Michael's, just in relation to this podcast, talking about being our own worst enemy. My sister, one of her best mates is Brian Lake, and she's gone around his place tonight because they're watching Survivor or something. He's on Survivor.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
He's out of prison, is he?
I don't know. I know where he is. I won't spoil it for you. I don't watch it. But she just sent a message. Brian said to tell you on your podcast, Richmond cannot lose the flag. So there we go.
That's a good endorsement from Brian Lake.
He's backed us, but I don't think. I mean, say their own worst enemy. Well, there's been no signs of that. They're so dialed into what they're doing. There's been no sign of it in one home and away game, so I don't see why it's going to happen in a final. I think when they come to the finals, they're just the pressure is going to go up to a notch that other teams aren't going to be aren't going to be able to handle. It happened last year, and we're a better side this year than last year. I just think we're a fair bit better than the other teams.
If we happen to repeat what we did last year in terms of beating teams by 25, 30 points through the final series, surely all the bullshit has to stop about us being the worst finals team. It was a fluke and this, that, and the other. It'll
never stop, ever. It'll just be a continuous shifting of the goalposts. I mean, if we don't three-peat, they'll say, a lot worse than Hawthorn. Anyway, that's getting ahead of ourselves a bit, but
it is.
I just think there's nothing that Richmond can do to be regarded as deserving or, anything like that.
And so just backing over to the Brian Lake thing, Rodney, can you tell him to reply to my tweet that I sent him a few years ago to come onto the podcast? I'll tweet him, try and get him on, and he just blanked me.
I could probably get him on the podcast, I would say. He's one of my sister's living with me at the moment, and she's one of his best friends, so I'll see what I can do.
Well, it could be a final special, get Brian Lake on. There's a bit of projects for you.
Well, he knows I'm on the podcast tonight, so he's got the message sent through, so we'll see how we go.
Very good. All right, before we get on to...
cut what I said about him
then. Before we get on to the preview for the game this Friday night, there's a few questions from listeners sent in. We have kind of covered some of these off, but we'll ask them again. First one is from Twitter, from Justin Seppi. I hope I said that right. Is Reece Conker's injury serious? I think the new rolled ankle. He was playing such good, consistent footy for us until the ankle dislocation. Is there any chance we'll see him back in the team for finals? Duke, what do you reckon? I know he said before it's risky. Do we take the punt if he does get right, or do you think it's just curtains out? Like, he's rolled his ankle again. It could be another couple of weeks. Is it just too risky now?
Yeah, I think it is too risky, and I think, I just feel really bad for Conker because he can't put in consistent strings, and he was doing it this year, and then that horrific ankle dislocation, and now he's done it again. But yeah, I just think you don't take the risk, especially when he hasn't played with the team for so long.
Fair enough. And Rodney, I'll give you this one. This is from a member of BigFooty, Tony Montana 344. Soldo looked good on the weekend. Is it too late to include him for our plans for September? Could he be another Townsend?
I don't think so, but I'm pretty bullish on Soldo long term. To be for big picture, there's I think we've had the luxury the way we're going. We're sort of shaping our future next year and beyond, whilst we're in the middle of this season and looking at a final series. And we've had the luxury of playing in the Avance Soldo and Menadue and these guys in the last few weeks. Rioli in the midfield. I think they're experimenting with it. I don't think we'll see him in the finals, but I'm really impressed with the way he's come on. But I don't think it'll be this year, but I think he'll be a really good player long term.
I agree, because I think a lot of people forget that not only do ruckman take longer to develop, but he's only still pretty new to the game itself. So the fact that he can sort of do what he does now at the top level with the limited experience and exposure he's had is a pretty good sign.
Yeah, absolutely. He looks really good to me.
Yeah, I like him. I wouldn't be against giving him a few more games next year, even if it was Nank plays 4 or 5 in a row, has one off, get Soldo in, or if they can find room for both of them in the same game for certain teams, just to give Nank a bit more of a rest and give him some extra minutes up forward or on the bench, whatever it takes. I think there's definitely something to work with.
Last 2 weeks that could happen as a to look into the future, because we're going to finish on top. Let's be honest, or top 2, but we're going to finish on top. Let's be fair, and they might experiment it with a game this year. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, playing the 2 ruckmen and see what it looks like.
We'll just see how it goes.
Yeah, I think it's the best time to do it as well, because you can't get AFL experience in pre-season, obviously. So.
Yeah, especially, I suppose, playing against Essendon, who are obviously fighting for their season, and the Bulldogs have hit a little bit of form, so to get that real pressure environment to see how it stands up might not be a bad thing to see. Speaking of Essendon, we play the Bombers this Friday night. Like I just said then, it's a game that pretty much defines their season. They've got to rely on a few other results to go their way to get them into the finals. But ultimately, this is a must-win game. It's their grand final against us, and that's not even taking the piss this time. It actually is, because if they lose, they're pretty much cooked. Duke, what do you make of this game coming up? Big game against the Bombers.
Oh, I think Essendon will throw everything they've got at us, obviously, but I don't know. I just think we're a cut above, and I think that their game style and their players are particularly susceptible to pressure and physical and implied. So I think they'll wilt a bit. Probably keep it within 30 points, but I wouldn't hazard closer than that.
And that's what happened last time, I think, wasn't it? I remember coming into the game when we first played them that there was all this talk about them bringing the searing heat to the game. And in the first 15 minutes, we just blew them off the park with pressure, and they just didn't recover from it for the rest of the game. So
they had no chance.
Yeah. So are you anticipating something similar to that?
Well, it's hard to say, really, but yeah, that could definitely happen. What I would think is all right to happen is that we actually lose, and that might sound strange to say, but I've seen that sentiment thrown around a bit, and I genuinely believe that we need one loss just to kick us up the arse a bit. Whether that's a loss because of excessive experimentation maybe, or, just easing off or being lazy, then I think it'd give Dimmer some good ammunition to,
just a bit of a friendly reminder.
Finals. Yeah, exactly. And show that nobody is safe and nobody has a golden ticket to finals. And, if you're out of form, you're not going to get played.
Which is fair enough. And Rodney, to that point, is there an element of that natural complacency might creep in with the guys, knowing that top 2 is sewn up, like you said before? Do you think there's a chance that may creep in, or are we at a level now where we'll just keep playing our game no matter who's in the side, no matter what position we're in, and just keep going at it?
Oh, I think it's a little bit of human nature. Like, they're playing, most of the Essendon side this week are playing the biggest game of their lives. That's fact. And it's a massive game, big crowd. They need to win. They have to win. It's like their grand final. For us, not so much. And if they bring a lot of intensity early in the game, there's a propensity to sort of sit back. I'm not up to this shit. We've got finals coming up, and you might pull back a little bit. But on the flip side, we've probably got, as I said before, 8 to 10 players that are absolutely playing for their spots. Even someone as good as a Jaden Short, every single week they go out there, they're playing for their spot. So those blokes aren't going to pull back. But the guns, they might. It's human nature. So I could see that happening. But a lot will depend on the first 20 minutes of the game. If Essendon bring a lot of heat, subconsciously we may pull back a bit.
The other thing that can happen too, if you start pulling back a bit when the other team's going 100 mile an hour, that's when you are likely to get more injured. So I kind of hope we don't take that approach, because I don't want to start copping big hits and injuries at this time of the year.
Well, you're right there, and they have never fallen into that before, so I hope they don't. But when you've again human nature, you're a premiership player. You've been there before. You might start looking after yourself. Hopefully they don't, because you're right. You're 100% right. The harder you go, the less chance you are to get hurt.
And what about some of the key matchups for this weekend, Duke? I know Essendon are potentially going to be without a few key players, but the big matchup that is usually always a good one to watch is Hurley versus Jack Riewoldt. How do you see that one panning out?
Well, Hurley's gotten the better of Jack a few times, but I don't know. I think we'll completely swing the pendulum the opposite way this week, and everybody will be Jack conscious, and somebody like a Castagna or somebody else might bob up and kick a few. Caddy, I think, will have a big game. Essendon are a bit depleted as well with their injuries, I think. So,
well, they may. I don't know what their official outs are, but it reads like Fantasia's definitely going to be an out, and there's question marks over Goddard, Sard, and Hooker with injuries. So, I mean, if all four of them happen to miss, they're in a lot of trouble. I think. I don't know if they can cover that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I think you're right. Somebody will just kick a few big goals on them.
And Rodney, what about from the matchup from our perspective? I'm guessing we're going to bring Nankervis back in. He's probably going to go up against Big Tom Bellchambers. How do you see Nank holding his own against Tom?
Yeah, I'm wondering if he'll actually play. I mean, depending on what the injury is, how legit it was or how sore he is, he's the sort of player that probably could have a couple of weeks off, come back last round. But if he does play, it's just going to be typical Nank. He's probably not going to win the hit-outs. He's just going to go 100 mile an hour. He must be the worst player to play on. Like, he's so bloody vicious at every contest from minute 1 to minute 120. And he's like Koch and all those guys. He's a real barometer for us, the way he goes about his footy. So if he plays, he'll just be the typical Nank and be very hard for Bellchambers to beat him in the hit-outs, but that'll be about it. Around the ground, Nank will kill him.
And speaking of other changes, Duke, obviously Kane Lambert, it's come up tonight that he's going to be out for 2 weeks. Who do you see might come back in for him?
Oh, I reckon Lloyd. I reckon Lloyd is probably the best like-for-like replacement. Not really like-for-like in terms of defensive running, but he's got skills. I think he's been playing well at VFL level. I think he deserves a shot.
Yeah, I think that could be the way to go. The other one thrown around was Townsend, but it's not really a like midfield role. If they were to do that, then maybe that would mean Rioli would spend more time in the midfield potentially when put Townsend up forward. So I suppose they've got a few combinations there to work with. But to cover the amount of Ks that Lambert does is going to be very, very hard to replace.
Yeah.
And I suppose the other players to watch out for Essendon is Andy McGrath. I think is very underrated for them coming off the half-back line. I think he sets up a lot of their play. Do we sit someone on one of their half-backs and maybe even particularly McGrath to keep an eye on him, Rodney?
I don't think we worry too much about that. He's a very good player. But,
Just go head-to-head?
Yeah, just back ourselves in the way we do.
Yeah, the only player that I'm worried about with that sort of thing is actually Hurley. But in this case, he'll probably be in a one-on-one. So, I mean, I'm always worried about the loose man floating around, and I think we need to man them up, like we did last final series against Lever and Henderson and that. So that could be a place where Townsend comes in handy, but like I said, I reckon Lloyd comes in.
And I think, I know with Jack kicking 10 last week, I think the one thing to take out of that, and hopefully we can keep trying to do going forward, is the getting more used to lowering our eyes when going inside 50. Because when we bomb it away, we're pretty suspect to getting it cut off by opposition defenders, given that Jacks virtually are only tall. So hopefully that trend can continue of lowering our eyes and picking the best option inside 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate. Yeah.
No, you go. No, I wasn't going to say anything else.
No, I was just going to say, you made a good point with Townsend. I sort of wonder about Tanner. I think he's regarded as a lot more important by coaches than he is maybe by the fans. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he was given the week off last week. He's done a power of work and he's always looking sore and tired and buggered because he makes so many efforts. And I just wonder if they thought, well, there's a game we don't really need him because he does that much work for Jack. And the way the game panned out, there was no need for Townsend on the weekend because Jack, as you alluded to, Michaels, Jack just hit up on those leads where no one was cutting him off, and he just had a picnic. I just wonder if they've put Towner away for when it really counts.
He makes those defenders aware of him, doesn't he? He just slams into them, either in the air or... I mean, his tackle on Lever last year, where he took him right over the boundary line and buried him, I mean, that sticks out in the mind, and probably in opposition defenders as well.
But even when the ball's not in the forward line, you just see him constantly niggling and nagging the defender that he's on. So like you said, he definitely makes his presence known, which is almost enough to take their mind off their actual task. So, and I think that's pretty underrated in a game where we've got one big key forward. The work Townsend does off the ball is huge and is a big key to us being successful. So I wouldn't be shocked if they just sort of tucked him away and brought him back out for finals. But like you said before, Rodney, the competition for spots is heating up. So whoever comes in needs to really make the most of it. All right, before we finish up, we'll get a tip from you both for the game. Rodney, I'll start with you. What's your tip for the game, including margin?
I've actually been thinking, Rob, I would be pretty disappointed as an Essendon fan if they did win this game, because I just think that they're playing their grand final and we're sort of going through the motions. But as the week wears on, I'm sort of thinking, well, we're probably still better than them. I think we might win, but pretty narrowly. Maybe I'll say Richmond by 11 points. No
worries. And Duke, what about yourself?
I reckon this game has a bit of that Sydney game in 2014 where Sydney had finished top and we had to win to make finals. So I'm going to say Essendon by 3 and wait for the fruit to come our way, the rotten fruit.
Essendon by 3. I reckon winning form's good form, and as much as we may tinker with a few things, I just think that our guys, a lot of them are far too competitive to let a game slip, especially being at the MCG and keeping up that good momentum. Essendon will throw everything at us, but I reckon we might roll them later on in the game and come away with about an 18-point win. All right, well, Rodney Dangerfield and Duke, thank you so much for coming on, guys. And just a reminder, the game is on Friday, 7:50 p.m. at the MCG, and we're going for 20 in a row, so make sure you get down there. Rodney and Duke, thanks heaps again. Until next time, go Tigers.
Thank you, mate.
No worries, thanks.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Richmond BigFooty Tigercast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and YouTube so you can follow all the roast and toast, the reviews and previews, and all topics Richmond. Also keep an ear out for our special episodes of interviews with past players. Go Tigers.